Alright, Legacy. The best format ever. Ever. So, why is Legacy so good? Let's talk about the deck construction limitations when you're playing Legacy. When you're playing Legacy, you get to use cards from any set. There's a ban list. It's about 60 cards. It stops the most disgusting things from happening, such as Flash Hulk. Flash Hulk is basically a combo that involves playing a 2-mana card and winning the game on the spot. Not fun as you can imagine. Also, no powerful tutors are banned. Super fast mana accelerators are banned. But in general, you can do pretty much whatever the heck you want. Also, dual lands. Legal. In Legacy. You should play Legacy. So, because Legacy spans such a large time period of Magic, and there were a lot of cards that are accidentally too powerful in Magic's time span in Magic's time span, with Legacy being cards that are legal in Legacy. There are a lot of accidents. Anyway, these accidents make for really interesting decks. There are easily, I'm not going to name them now because, well, actually, I should do a segment where I just name Legacy deck lists. There are at least 20 decks, 20 different decks, very different decks that can be considered tier 1 or 2 in Legacy. So it's a very dynamic format. There are a lot of different ways to attack your opponent, and just play the game of Magic. You can play it in so many ways. Let's start with something simple. Burn. There's a mono red burn deck. You just play lightning bolts and goblin guides. Aggressive creatures, damage spells. Kill your opponent as fast as possible. Another deck, Merfolk. Play as many Merfolk lords as you can. Each one pumps the other. You also have a few counter spells. But you're playing an aggro deck. You have 4 creatures on the field, and they're all 4/4s. By the way, 4/4, huge in Legacy. We're talking about a format where most creatures are not bigger than 3/3s. Maverick, my personal favorite. Green-white deck. Green-white control. No counter magic. You're stopping your opponent from doing what they're trying to do via the power of Green Sun Zenith, which tutors for a green creature. Yeah, so you get to react to whatever your opponent's doing. It's a very flexible deck. It's not blue. It still wins against unfair decks. It's amazing. I love it. Zombies. There is a Zombies Legacy deck. Your first turn, hopefully, is the red-black dual land, because this is Legacy and you get to play awesome things. You cast Faithless Looting, which is draw 2, discard 2. You draw 2 cards, you discard 2 Bloodghasts. Bloodghast, I mentioned it earlier in another section. Whenever you play a land, return Bloodghast to the battlefield. So the next turn, you play a land. 2 Bloodghasts in play. And you drew 2 cards. These are the cards you discarded after drawing 2 cards. So that's Legacy Zombies. There's a Goblins deck. There's an Elf deck. There's many combo decks. There's the Ad Nauseam Tendrils deck where you try to draw your entire deck and mill your opponent out. There's the Cephalid Breakfast deck where you flip your entire deck on the table. It's in your graveyard, actually. And you kill your opponent with an infinite combo that way. There's there's Goblin Charbelcher, which I mentioned in another earlier one, where you're playing 1 land in your entire deck. You find it, you play Goblin Charbelcher, you activate, you flip over your entire deck, and you deal your opponent 40 damage on the first turn or something. That deck's pretty funny. There's a mono-white control deck. It's called Death and Taxes. It's basically Maverick, except you don't play Green Sun Zenith, you just play more hate. You're basically just trying to stop what your opponent does, and then you have a combo involving Caracas, which is it's a land that bounces a creature, and Mangara of Condor. Basically, the combo lets you exile permanents indefinitely. So you exile your opponent's entire board while attacking them with 2/2s. So that's Death and Taxes. The Reanimator. You discard a huge creature and you reanimate it. This is all legal in Legacy, and it's all balanced. Certain decks are going to be really good. Oh, I forgot about the best one. There's a deck called 42 Lands. It doesn't actually play 42 lands. It plays like 30-something lands. But still, the entire point of the deck is to have the most powerful lands and win via lands. Isn't that amazing? Legacy's so cool. So, yeah, all of these decks are viable. Like, I've seen so many different Legacy decks win big Legacy tournaments. Sure, some decks are more consistent than others, but nevertheless, you can still play pretty much whatever you want as long as it's viable. I've seen someone play Death Shadow. Death Shadow, 1 mana, 13/13, but it gets -1/-1 for each point of life you have. So if you're at 20, it's a -7/-7. So don't even try playing it on turn 1. But the whole point of the deck is to like lower your life total until you're at like 2 life, and then you have a 1 mana 11/11. Like, I've seen that one game. Legacy, you just get to do whatever you want. But what holds it all together is Force of Will, Wasteland, and Graveyard Hate? I don't know. Force of Will, it's a free counterspell, but you have to exile a blue card. So it lets blue decks play this controlling deck. It lets you counter like your opponent's combos, where you're okay using 2 cards to counter one of their cards, because one of their cards is so important that you need to use 2 cards to deal with it. That's one of the pillars. There's also Wasteland, which punishes people for having too greedy of a mana base. It's interesting how in Modern, you get to play whatever mana base you want. You have fetch lands, you have dual lands. For those of you who don't know, like, something Bayou, for example, Overgrown Tomb, whatever, doesn't matter. It's a forest swamp, so you get to, if you have a card that sacrifices itself and fetches either a forest or a mountain, you can get a Bayou. And then you have access to whatever mana you want. In Modern, you get away with these greedy mana bases. In Legacy, there's a card called Wasteland, which is the land. Tap, sacrifice, destroy target non-basic land. So if someone's playing really greedy mana base, they're trying to play too many colors, you get to punish them. So that's another thing that makes Legacy awesome. What did I call it? Graveyard Hate. Graveyard Hate. That's the other one. Graveyard Hate is pretty easy to come by in Legacy. There's this card called Scavenging Ooze. Scavenging Ooze is awesome. It's a 2 mana 2/2. So Grizzly Bear. But it has this activated ability. Green, exile target card from a graveyard. Gain 1 life, put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze. You can exile any card, but it only gets the +1/+1 counter if it's a creature card. So a lot of these combo decks in Legacy revolve around the graveyard, such as Reanimator. Put a card in the graveyard, reanimate it. Scavenging Ooze helps prevent against that, and it lets you play this green-white control deck, which I love so much, as you can probably tell. But yeah, so you get to do whatever you want in Legacy. You can play a control deck that's green and white. You can play a control deck that's blue, black, and green. You can play the two biggest card advantage decks are Goblins and Enchantress. Like, the blue is supposed to be the color of card advantage. The 2 best card advantage decks are mono red and green white. Enchantress is green white, right? It can be green blue. Anyway, when you're playing Goblins, you play Goblin Matron, which is a 1/1 Goblin for 3, but when it enters the battlefield, tutor for a Goblin and put into your hand. So it's basically a free card. You play it, and you get whatever Goblin you want. 3 mana tutor. Doesn't exist in Legacy. And also Goblin Ringleader, which I discussed earlier. You play it, reveal the top 4 cards, each Goblin goes into your hand. And then the Enchantress deck, you are playing a deck full of enchantments, but you have an Enchantress, so whenever you play an enchantment, you draw a card. Sometimes you have more than one enchantment. Sometimes your Enchantress is an enchantment itself. So you just draw your entire deck. And then, like, you win by attacking with 1/1s or something. Legacy is beautiful. If you don't have the money to play it, which is totally understandable, I strongly believe that you should take our trusty friend Drainpipe Vermin here, write on the back of it, write whatever card, write Wasteland or Force of Will or Mason, not Mason Enchantress, Argothian Enchantress. Build a deck. Play with the backs of your cards. These cards that are not worth very much. And just play Legacy with your friends. It's so beautiful. It's, in my opinion, one of the ways Magic was meant to be played. Alright, thanks for tuning in.